You're eating right. You're moving your body. You're doing what everyone says you're supposed to do. And yet the number on the scale stares back like it's mocking you. Or worse, you're watching your waistline inch forward even though your habits haven't changed. So you start asking the question that quietly terrifies people. What if my body just doesn't burn fat anymore? But what if the real problem isn't your discipline and it isn't your calories? And it isn't that you need to try harder, because something far more invisible has been calling the shots the whole time, especially at night when you think your body is resting. Because the truth is, you don't just lose or gain fat during the day, you do it in cycles. And the most overlooked cycle is the one that happens while you sleep. Overnight is supposed to be the time your body switches into repair mode, cleans up metabolic damage, stabilizes hormones, and quietly burns stored fuel. That's the design. But if the internal switches that control that cycle are out of sync, your body can spend the night doing the opposite, holding fat tighter, releasing sugar into the bloodstream, and waking you up hungrier than you went to bed. And that's why calories in, calories out feels like an insult to people who are genuinely trying. So if you've ever had a week where you ate clean, walked more, stayed consistent, and still felt puffy, still felt heavy, still felt stuck, it's not because your body is stubborn. It's because your metabolism is listening to signals you're not thinking about. Signals coming from insulin, signals coming from your liver, signals coming from stress hormones like cortisol. And when those signals are wrong, fat loss becomes a constant uphill climb, even when you're doing everything right. Now, here's where this gets interesting. Because the solution isn't some extreme routine, it's not a miracle pill, and it's not a punishment plan. It's something simple enough that people dismiss it, which is exactly why it works best when you understand the bigger picture. It's a tea, but not tea as a cute wellness accessory. Not tea as some fantasy drink that melts fat while you sit on the couch. This is tea as a tool, one piece of a much larger strategy that nudges your biology in the right direction, especially at night when your body decides whether to repair or store. And the reason a tea can matter isn't because it's magic. It's because certain teas are loaded with plant compounds that interact with the exact pathways that control fat storage. Compounds like cacains and polyphenols. One in particular gets talked about in research a lot. EGCG. And no, that acronym isn't a spell, it's a signal. It's a chemical messenger that can influence insulin sensitivity, liver fat handling, mitochondrial activity, and even stress response in subtle but meaningful ways. But it only matters if you're using it as part of a rhythm. Because if your overall rhythm is chaotic, no tea on earth can override it. So let's zoom out for a second. Because the big problem with stubborn fat, especially belly fat, isn't just that it changes how you look. It's that it changes what's happening inside. Fat around the belly and organs is not passive storage. It's metabolically active tissue, and it increases the risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, chronic fatigue, and accelerated aging. It drags down energy, it affects focus, it changes hunger. And that's why trying to fix belly fat without fixing the internal signals that created it is like mopping the floor without fixing the leak. You can keep working, but the water keeps coming. And the leak usually has three sources, which is what most people never talk about. The first is insulin resistance, because insulin is not just a hormone, it's a command. And when that command keeps firing all day, your body stays locked in storage mode. The second is an overloaded liver, because your liver is the engine that processes fat and sugar. And when it gets clogged, the whole system slows down. The third is chronic stress, because cortisol is the hormone that tells your body to protect energy, store belly fat, and slow down metabolism when it senses danger, even if the danger is just modern life. If those three are out of sync, you can eat fewer calories and still feel stuck. Because fat loss isn't just about what you eat, it's about what your body thinks is happening. Is there abundance? Is there danger? Is the liver clean enough to process fuel? Is insulin low enough to unlock fat stores? Is cortisol calm enough for the body to let go? Those questions decide everything. And most people never even realize their body is answering them all day, especially at night. So let's start with a core truth that's going to make a lot of people feel relieved. Most people who struggle with fat loss are not lazy. They're not broken. They're stuck in a biological state that constantly tells the body to store. And the most common way people accidentally create that state is by eating too often. Breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, dessert, and maybe something small later because they earned it. And every time they eat, blood sugar rises, insulin rises. And insulin doesn't just move glucose into cells. It delivers another message: store this fuel, don't release fat. That's why you can have a full tank and still feel tired, because you have energy stored, but you can't access it. It's like having a car with a full tank, but a locked fuel line. And when that happens day after day, month after month, your cells start ignoring insulin. That's insulin resistance. So your body produces even more insulin to get the same job done. And higher insulin means fat stays locked away even harder. You're not failing. You're trapped in a hormonal loop. Now add the liver. The liver is supposed to be your metabolic control center. Everything you eat passes through it. It decides what gets stored, what gets used, what gets converted, and what gets flushed out. But when you feed the liver too much sugar, too many processed fats, and too many constant insulin spikes, liver cells get clogged. Fat builds up in the liver. That's fatty liver. And when your liver is fatty, your metabolism slows, your triglycerides rise, your insulin resistance worsens, and your body becomes even more efficient at storing fat instead of burning it. Then comes the silent amplifier that makes everything feel impossible: stress. Cortisol rises when your body senses a threat. And cortisol was designed to save you, not sabotage you. It mobilizes sugar, keeps you alert, helps you survive. But in modern life, cortisol stays elevated for all the wrong reasons: poor sleep, constant work pressure, emotional stress. Stimulants like caffeine used to push through exhaustion. And when cortisol stays high, it tells your body to store belly fat, hold on to sugar, and slow down metabolism because your body thinks you're in a survival situation. So you can see the trap forming. Insulin is high because of constant eating and insulin resistance. The liver is overloaded and can't process fuel efficiently. Cortisol is elevated in signal storage. Now, fat loss isn't just hard, it's biologically resisted. You can cut calories and the body fights back by slowing metabolism. You can exercise and the body compensates by increasing hunger. You can do everything right and still feel like you're pushing a boulder uphill because the internal switches are telling your body to store. And this is where people start looking for something to boost metabolism, which usually leads them into scams and gimmicks. But hidden inside that desperation is a real truth. If you can shift the internal switches, fat loss becomes easier without more effort. You don't need more suffering. You need better signaling. And that's where the tea comes in, not as a standalone cure, but as a gentle lever that can tilt those switches back toward burning. Certain teas, especially green tea, matcha, oolong, and yerba mate, contain cacans and polyphenols that act like tiny chemical messengers. EGCG is one of the most studied. It's been linked in research to increase fat oxidation, improved insulin sensitivity, support for liver fat reduction, and activation of pathways that influence mitochondrial energy use. But the reason people get confused is because they hear tea boosts fat burning and assume they can just sip it randomly and expect a dramatic change. That's not how it works. It works when it's timed properly, brewed properly, and used in the right context, because otherwise you block the benefits without realizing it. And this is where the story starts to get more specific, because the 3 metabolic triggers no one is talking about are not drink more water, or walk more, or sleep more, even though those matter. The triggers are the switches that decide whether your body can burn fat overnight. And they're controlled by insulin, the liver, and cortisol. If those 3 shift even slightly, overnight fat burning can suddenly feel like it turns on again. You wake up less puffy, you wake up less hungry, your energy is steadier, your cravings are quieter, and you start losing fat in a way that feels natural instead of forced. But to understand how a tea fits into that, you need to understand what it's actually doing in the body. Because the tea isn't melting fat, it's helping restore metabolic flexibility, your ability to switch between burning sugar and burning fat. Think of your body like a hybrid car. It can run on glucose like gasoline, and it can run on fat like a battery. Most people are stuck in gasoline mode because insulin keeps the battery locked. The cacans in these teas can help unlock the battery. Not instantly, not dramatically, but consistently, day after day, in a way that supports the body's natural design. And here's where AMPK comes in, because this is the master switch people rarely hear about outside of science circles. AMPK is like a cellular switchboard that gets activated when energy needs to be mobilized. When AMPK is on, the body shifts away from storage and toward burning. It improves insulin sensitivity, it supports fat oxidation, it signals the liver to handle fat more efficiently, and compounds like EGCG have been associated with AMPK activation in various studies. That's why people often report feeling lighter in energy, not just in weight, when they build these habits, because the system becomes more efficient at using stored fuel instead of constantly demanding new fuel. But again, there's a catch, and this catch is why most people never get the benefit. The type of tea matters, the brewing method matters, the water temperature matters, what you add to it matters, and the timing matters, because you can take something that could help you and neutralize it without realizing it. Boiling water can damage certain delicate compounds. Steeping too long can change the profile. Adding sugar turns the whole thing into an insulin event, which defeats the purpose. Adding milk can bind to certain polyphenols and reduce absorption. That's why people drink tea for years and swear it does nothing, because they're using it in a way that blocks the very effect they're hoping for. So if you've ever been someone who tried green tea and felt no difference, that doesn't mean the tea was useless. It may mean the strategy was incomplete. It may mean the timing was wrong, or the brewing was wrong, or the tea was low quality, or you were mixing it with sugar and milk and turning it into something else entirely. And once you fix those variables, it stops being a beverage and starts becoming a lever, especially when it's paired with the rhythm that allows overnight fat burning to actually happen. Because overnight fat burning isn't just fat loss while you sleep. It's the state your body enters when insulin is low enough, liver function is supportive, and cortisol is calm enough for the body to release stored fuel without panic. If you eat late and spike insulin, you shut that state down. If your liver is overloaded, it struggles to process the fat you're releasing. If your cortisol is high, the body holds on because it senses danger. So the tea, when used correctly, is designed to support those three, not replace the bigger rhythm. And now we're at the point where most people lean in, because the question becomes, what are the three triggers? And how do you actually flip them in real life? Because you can understand insulin, liver, and cortisol intellectually and still feel stuck if you don't know what to do at night, what to do in the morning, and how to use the tea in a way that doesn't sabotage you. So here's where we're going next. First, we're going to expose the sneaky habits that keep insulin elevated even when you think you're eating clean, because those habits are the reason fat stays locked. Then we're going to look at how the liver becomes overloaded and what it needs to start clearing out so it can handle fat again. And finally, we're going to talk about cortisol, the stress signal that can erase your progress overnight even if your diet is perfect. Because when cortisol is high, your body stores especially around the belly. And then, only after you see those three switches clearly, we'll plug the tea into the system with precision. When to drink it, how to brew it, what to avoid adding, and how to pair it with your eating rhythm, so it becomes a real tool instead of another habit that doesn't work. Because the truth is, the tea doesn't create the fire. It helps remove the dampness that's been smothering it. So stay with me, because in the next section of this video, we're going to break the myth that stubborn fat is a willpower problem, and we're going to show you the exact moment your body gets trapped in storage mode, the exact reason it stays there overnight, and the simplest way to start flipping those internal switches so you wake up feeling like your body is finally working with you again. The moment your body gets trapped in storage mode usually isn't the big, obvious meal you feel guilty about. It's the pattern you barely notice, the constant eating, the late bite, the healthy snack, the little sweet treat after dinner that feels too small to matter. But the body doesn't measure your snacks emotionally. It measures them hormonally. Every time you eat, insulin rises. And insulin is the lock on your fat cells. So if you spend the entire day feeding, grazing, sipping, and snacking, you never give insulin the chance to fall low enough for fat to unlock. You can cut calories and still stay locked because the pump isn't broken from lack of effort. It's broken from constant signals. That's why the first trigger is insulin timing, because overnight fat burning is impossible if insulin stays elevated into the evening. Your body can't burn stored fat and store new fuel at the same time. If you eat late, especially carbs or sweets, your blood sugar rises, insulin rises, and the message is clear: store, don't release. So while you sleep, instead of dipping deeper into fat access and repair, your body stays in processing mode, dealing with incoming energy. And by morning, you wake up hungry because you never fully entered the calm, low insulin state that should have happened. And the craziest part is that this creates a loop. Late eating keeps insulin high. High insulin blocks fat release. Blocked fat release makes energy unstable. Unstable energy makes you crave more food. And therefore, the very habit that helps you feel better at night is the habit that makes you feel worse the next day. Most people assume they need more discipline to stop it. But discipline fails when the body feels threatened. The real fix is to make the body feel safe enough to let insulin fall. This is where the second trigger comes in, and it's the one people almost never connect to their weight: liver overload. Your liver is the engine that decides what happens to fuel. It processes sugar, it processes fat, it packages and exports energy, and it manages toxins and hormones. But when you constantly flood it with sugar and processed fats, and when insulin is always high, the liver starts storing fat inside its own cells. That's fatty liver. And even mild fatty liver slows metabolism because the engine is clogged. So even if you're doing all the right things, the body can't efficiently burn what it's releasing because the processing center is jammed. That's why stubborn belly fat so often travels with fatigue, brain fog, and that feeling that you're dragging yourself through the day. Because the liver isn't just a filter, it's a metabolic command center. And when it's overloaded, the body becomes less flexible. It stops switching smoothly between sugar and fat. It becomes dependent on frequent eating for energy because the fat burning system isn't flowing. Then the third trigger arrives like a silent assassin, because even if you fix insulin timing and you support your liver, stress can erase it. Cortisol is your survival hormone. It was designed to keep you alive during danger by increasing available fuel, raising blood sugar, and telling the body to store energy for later, often as belly fat. But modern life triggers cortisol constantly. Poor sleep, too much caffeine, emotional stress, late night screen time. And when cortisol stays high, the body interprets it as threat. And when the body senses threat, it holds. That's why you can eat perfectly and still not lose belly fat if sleep is broken and stress is constant, because your biology is prioritizing survival over aesthetics. Now watch what happens when these three triggers stack. Insulin stays high late, so fat remains locked. The liver is overloaded, so fuel processing slows. Cortisol stays elevated, so the body stores even more and resists letting go. And then you wake up and think you need to try harder. But your body is already fighting you before breakfast. That's why this isn't about doing more. It's about flipping the switches. So where does the tea fit? This is the moment it becomes useful, because certain teas contain compounds that nudge these systems in the right direction. Catechins like EGCG and other polyphenols have been studied for their ability to support insulin sensitivity and fat oxidation, and they're linked to activating pathways like the cellular switchboard that shifts the body from storage to burning. But the tea only helps if you stop blocking it with the habits that keep the locks closed. It's not a battering ram, it's a key that works when the door isn't welded shut. Here's how you use it as part of an overnight fat burning rhythm. First, you protect the evening insulin drop. You stop late night eating. not because you're punishing yourself, but because you're creating the hormonal environment where your body can actually switch into repair. This single change, ending food earlier, reduces the overnight insulin burden and sets the stage for fat access. Then you support the liver by removing the constant sugar hits and processed oils that keep it clogged. You don't need perfection, but you need fewer hits. And you calm cortisol by protecting sleep, because sleep is the master reset. Without sleep, the body stays on high alert, and high alert means storage. Now the tea becomes a lever you can pull inside that rhythm. Caffeinated caffeine-rich teas like green tea, matcha, and oolong are best earlier in the day because they can support metabolism and focus, but they're not ideal late at night if caffeine disrupts your sleep. That's why timing matters. If you drink it too late, you might raise cortisol by ruining sleep, and that would sabotage the whole plan. So you use the right tea at the right time. Earlier in the day, caffeine-rich tea to support metabolic signaling. Later in the evening, if you want a calming ritual, you switch to non-caffeinated herbal teas that support relaxation, because cortisol control is just as important as fat oxidation. And brewing matters because you can destroy or block the compounds you're trying to use. If you use boiling water and scorch delicate K-cans, you reduce the benefit. If you steep poorly and get weak extraction, you reduce the benefit. If you add sugar, you trigger insulin and wipe out the advantage. If you add milk, you can reduce absorption of certain polyphenols, so the tea has to stay clean. This isn't about taste, this is about signaling. But the most important part is what the tea represents. It's not a magic drink. It's a daily anchor that reinforces the rhythm.